there, what's up guys? We're on MNS Naturegrapher channel and today we have with us Zarris Kem. Well, why don't you start off this episode by introducing yourself to the audience. Over to you, Zarris.
My name is Zarris Kem. I'm a Malaysian, born and raised over here. I've been caving for over a decade already, mostly in Peninsula Malaysia on the west coast, all the way from Perlis down here at Batu Caves and anything in between. Haven't done Kelantan yet, but Pahang, the Kinta Valley, and also Northern Kedah as well.
How did your journey into caving, how did you get started?
Well, my father and my uncle are actually avid cavers. They were active cavers since the late 1980s in this case. When I moved to KL, I worked at Dark Cave extensively for around 6 years, from 2011 all the way to 2016. So Batu Caves has been a large part of my life and work and caving as well. I also do some caving all around in my free time.
Do you guide?
Yeah, I do. So I do guiding trips at Batu Caves. I used to do the Dark Cave, of course, a lot, but I also do guiding in other areas as well. But mostly it has to do with a purpose, normally with research. They like me because of my eye, and I tend to locate areas. In the terms of eye, is that I tend to spot things. I think an example is I work with the University of Malaya, and in this case, I help them spot fossils as well with their team together to look for fossils of previous ice age creatures that used to live over here.
What sort of affiliations do you represent?
Right now, currently, I'm a MCKC or Malaysian Cave and Karst Conservancy committee member. I'm also a member of the IUCN, which is the International Union for Conservation of Nature, Spider and Scorpion Specialist Group as well.
Right. For the audience, can you just explain what is karst?
All right, so everyone knows limestone. We see it, I think if everyone goes on a north-south highway or even visited Langkawi, we see basically limestone all around us. So even in KL, you see Batu Caves as well. But karst is basically describing the landscape area. It's actually a Slovenian word describing the limestone landscape of that region. And it basically kept. So people tend to say karst, and when they say karst, they mean a limestone landscape in general. It doesn't actually just include a single hill, but includes the whole formation. And I think a good example is like the Kinta Valley. It's a karst landscape. You have multiple hills, but they're all connected to one geological body. There's a heritage value over there. I guess how does it come back to us, and how does it impact if you look at our human history? These cities like Kuala Lumpur and Ipoh are known for tin, and the nature of limestone and what has happened over time is that these valleys created by the limestone, as it gets dissolved, traps a lot of these minerals which we use and of course started our cities from. So that's a little part of history on the heritage side. On how does it benefit us is also we get to learn about our past, helping us moving forward. This can be with fossils that you find, and fossils can tell us what lived over here, why they're extinct today. And this was in the previous ice ages, so in the tens of thousands, a few thousands of years. The other is basically of where they are today as well. Like for example, we find orangutan fossils in Peninsula Malaysia, a lot of work done by Asen. And in this case, they're not here today. And of course, it's a question why as well. And there's always a discussion happening of why you find them in Sumatra and Borneo, but not here. How does it benefit us? I think we all know penicillin. And of course, penicillin comes from a mushroom, a fungus.
Right.
And limestone caves are known to harbor a lot of fungus, actually. And you never know what you can find inside these caves as well. And you can even find certain insects that have benefits for us. For example, certain cockroaches have fats, which we can actually use to synthesize vitamins for ourselves on the pharmaceutical side. And from there, there's a myriad of uses for us to learn from the past to move forward and also use sustainably as a resource. So limestone, if you want to put it, it's like an island of biodiversity, and the caves are like museums as well in some way.
Right. I remember seeing the subterranean formations down in Batu Caves, yeah. So can you describe to us how does it come about?
Okay, well, limestone is, as I mentioned, is a very porous rock. So it's exposed to the forces of nature and gets easily eroded and dissolved away, to put it simply. But the easiest way to describe it, caves are formed by water, and water flowing through in a river or stream dissolved the cave out. So millions of years, I think there was a paper done by Dr. Rose Fatiha of University of Malaya that calculated roughly based on the rate of dissolving of the water, the acidity of how long it would take to form a cave like Tungkurong. And I could be wrong on this, but it could be like 1 million years to dissolve out a passage that large over time.
Perhaps the climate change had a part to play in this?
Yeah, I mean, the sea levels as we know, in a few thousand years ago, we had various ice ages on and off. So sea levels went up and down.
Show us your pictures that you have done, or your work that you have done, say in Perlis.
Okay, all right. How about I start with what I have with Batu caves in this case? Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, all right. So this is one particular photo. This is high up on the hill. This is maybe like 150 meters up the hill. We had to climb up. And we have this plant over here. This is actually a Maxipireta ripicola. It's actually an endemic palm found only in Selangor in this case. And this palm is actually not found even lower elevations. It's actually found higher up at Batu Caves. So you have to climb up now to find them. And this is one of the first times I've actually seen it way on the side. Because most of the time when you go around limestone hills, it's very intimidating to go up, straight up. And normally people just go on the perimeter. But if you were to work more on a particular hill and area, you'll find these things. Of course, this was described much earlier on, but it's a very important endemic to the state itself. And this is a species of yam that we find basically in Kinta Valley. So this yam in particular was found in a wang or a dolin, which is basically the middle of a limestone hill. I think we have like Gua Tasik, for example, in what do you call it, in the Kinta Valley, where basically you have the Tasik Cermin over there. Another example is, I wouldn't be sure if it's limestone, but Tasik Daim Bunting, you have a little valley in the middle. In some way that's also a wang for the dolin. So we basically find this this yam right over here. And these types of areas where it's a dip, they can't really get out. So there's a high chance of endemism, and these yams could be one endemic species found basically within a wang area, or even with a species that I'm working a lot with closely, which is the Lephisia spider. Let me just reshare the screen over here.
Yes.
All right, can you see Lephisia spider? I think you had a chance yourself, Constance, to see it.
Yes, I think I saw this, yeah.
Yeah, so this spider is actually inside a nest. So you can see its legs over here jutting out.
Yes.
And it has constructed this nest right over here. So the nest will consist of a door, which I have conveniently opened, and with a tube, and with trip lines that radiate out.
Yeah.
And what this trapdoor spider would do is that it will place its feet in between the lines, and if it feels any vibrations from insects, it will be prompted to go out and of course grab an insect. These spiders are also quite intelligent. The cave species and other species as well, some of them will actually have even a back door. This one has a back door here, you just don't see it. It's actually a flap. So the best way to imagine this nest is like a sleeping bag. Over here it is enforced, so it will stay open, but coming to the back, it just tapers down. So if it wants to escape, it can just come out the back and it just falls in. Just like a slim one if you come out, or like a blanket, for example. So this spider that you found throughout Peninsula Malaysia has not been found in East Malaysia. And it's actually a very primitive species of spider. Its design or anatomy is very different compared to modern spiders. They're more segmented. In this case, very primitive species of spider. Its design or anatomy is very different compared to modern spiders. They're more segmented in this case. And from there, it's not as smooth like a tarantula, as nice and smooth in one unit. Over here, you can almost see like the seams. I think the best way to imagine it is the new Land Rover Defender and the old Land Rover Defender. You know, the old Defender, you see all the rivets and the metal overlapping with each other, and the new Defender is all smooth, and so it's almost like that too.
The older one being more rugged.
Correct, yeah. And of course, of learning about the past, such spider is actually very interesting because you would find them inside caves and you find them in forests. And you also find them in caves around Peninsular Malaysia. So the question is, how did they get there? And who is their common ancestor? And why were they stuck in this cave, or why did they prefer to come into this cave as well? So there's a lot of work to be done, and this will normally require like genetic work, for example, to move forward to learn about where they came from and when did they start to come into the cave and be isolated there.
This species, is this the same one that you can find at hill slopes in the forest?
Yes, correct. The Liphysius malayanus, if I'm mistaken, you did a session with Stephen Wong, am I correct? At Fraser's Hill?
Right.
Yes, exactly. So the Liphysius malayanus is basically found in the forest and it's quite widely distributed. But you also have other basically forest-dwelling species of Liphysius, like in Penang, for example, as well. But they would build it on a bank, normally like a bank of mud or soil, and they dig a hole inside. And some of them will actually curve the hole like a C, so they have two doors. Some of them have a branch like a Y, and that's because of predators that come in. So these trapdoor spiders, Liphysius spiders, they do get predated on by like centipedes, for example, and they're quite smart, so they can sense if it's predator or prey coming by. They have basically this crab. Now, I'm not a crab person per se. However, I have collected crabs when I was younger in Perlis, and one of them was actually a new species. It's actually a cave which my father surveyed heavily in the 1990s. And when we went back in the 2000s, we saw the crab again. As a matter of fact, he saw the crab before when he was exploring the hill, but he didn't collect the specimen. But he thought about it back. It's like, if it's that deep in, almost like 1.5 kilometers deep of a nearly 3 kilometer system, it's most likely to be something different. And how is it different compared to even like this crab, for example? Now this crab, if you look at it, looks like a normal crab that you find by an ocean. They're very stout. But crabs that you find that live in caves, for example, or in fact, even invertebrates that like to live in caves, normally have a few features, and one of them is actually they have longer legs, smaller eyes, smaller bodies, and sometimes they lose their pigment or they lose their color. And these are very useful traits because if you are a big animal, you need to eat more. So it's hard for you to survive in a cave which doesn't have much energy. So your bodies get smaller. The longer legs is because if you're in the dark, you can't really sense your surroundings that well. The legs help you with stability. And so that particular crab that we collected in the cave was actually had those features and even had a lot of hair on it to actually feel its surroundings much better. So that became a new species. This one I never got it described. I didn't collect the specimen. I'm not the type to do that anyways. And no one should collect a specimen just like that. You should always, as a photo group, take a photo first. Take a creature which is very interesting are these geckos actually. Now this is a young individual. I have taken a photo of a older one, but it wasn't that clear. But these geckos are called bent-toed geckos, so they have a slight bend in their toe, and that's actually a feature to help them work around rocky terrains. So you normally find them around rock outcrops. The interesting part about these bent-toed geckos is that we find a lot of endemic bent-toed geckos all around Peninsular Malaysia, and they're always, most of the time, found above or surrounding limestone hills. And again, it's also a very interesting species or genus to look at because you find them on all these nooks and crannies, and of course, where did they come from originally, you know? And there has been a lot of genetic work, if I'm mistaken, done by Grisma as well, of their distribution and when did they branch off as well. But it's of course an ongoing process. But this particular species is actually endemic to the Batu Cave, and this was actually, I actually collected the first specimen ever. I was on a tour. I was going in, and normally on a tour I carry a little pouch. This is a normal public tour, and I have a little plastic for just in case anything I see or if anyone's not feeling well. So I saw this gecko, and I wasn't sure what it was. Never seen it, so I got it, put it in a plastic, got out. I took some photos, and then I went back in and released it. I sent the photo to basically my father, who sent it to University Science Malaysia, and they said, "We don't know what it is. Do you still have it?" And I was like, "Oh, we don't. We released it already." And so from there, basically, they came and they looked around. They couldn't find it, but the photo stayed nonetheless, and the photo was published in one publication. And from there, they actually found adult specimens at the Batu Caves, and it was confirmed to be a new species as well. So it's a very interesting find, all by accident. But if these creatures, these are cave crickets. This is one of it found in Perlis, for example. So these have the features that I mentioned. They have longer legs. They have different sensory organs. Their antennae are very long. However, this one in particular is a very interesting species. Their bodies are much bigger, and they're actually found more inside caves as a shelter. And this kind of species also still have quite a lot of pigment on them as well, but they don't make any sound, these kind of crickets. And they're very similar to the ones you find in New Zealand, like wittas, they call it, with their large crickets. But nonetheless, they have these appendages to survive in the darkness in a cave. And of course, a common question people ask me, like, "Oh, okay, how do they know when to be active?" You know, like these creatures are, most of the time I go in the day and they're staying still, you know, they're sleeping, let's say.
Okay.
And of course, the question is, how do they know between night and day? And that is the big question over there. Yes, and that's the beauty about caves, you know, they can have various cycles. Some say different pulls or tidal pulls from the moon affects how they actually know between night and day, the gravitational pulls. This same pull actually creates very tiny cracks in rocks, for example, over time as the pull and just relaxing. Sometimes it can be changes in air pressure. As we know, as we go by the beach in the morning, it's coming to our face. At night, it was going the next direction, the changes in pressure. So it's very interesting to think about how they have these biological clocks, which is very useful for humans because of space travel. We're going to be in darkness for a long time. How we're going to know night and day. Of course, we have these artificial lights to tell us that, but it's interesting to study how creatures like this, or even something closer to us like mammals, like a bat, how do they actually adapt themselves to this dark environment in terms of time. This is a Danus doveri. It's a it's on my finger, actually. And for those who care about fingers, I'm sorry, I don't really cut my nails too well. It's quite heavily seen over here. So this is a tiny pseudo scorpion. So it's not really a scorpion, it's a pseudo scorpion. They're very small. And they eat mites. And this is an adult, by the way. So this is my finger. It's very tiny. And this is endemic, actually. And this creature over here hasn't been heavily studied. It's been recorded. And then after that, it's quiet. No one studies how does it live, what does it like to eat in particular, and all the little details about it. Not much studies have been done on it. But it's a very unique animal. It runs faster backwards and forwards, and they just live in the guano. And it's guano is bat droppings, by the way, and they live over there. So it's very
I'm just so amazed that you can just pick out all these tiny little creatures in the dark. And how do you do that, Zarris?
And I don't know, actually. I started caving with carbide. So if some of the viewers remember going to the Pasar Malam and you see a little candle, instead of generators, those were carbide basically. It's a calcium, it's a rock, a processed limestone. And if it gets in contact with water, you get a chemical reaction, you get a flammable gas, and you light it up. So basically you have a fire on your head. And I guess maybe my eyes, I went through that transition between carbide to not very good LEDs to okay LEDs to the very good LEDs we have today. So perhaps during that process, you just your eyes get better to notice these things.
Yeah.
I think it's practice as well. I think as a photographer, you tend to not see scenes that much. Everything's beautiful, but you just have a style, you don't really see it. And when you see it, you're on it and you just take it. And I think it's something that you develop over time. I think even like Stephen or even his colleague Vince, they look for what do you call it, frogs, and I can't see it. I'm not very good at it, and they can spot it very well. I guess it's just practice, and it's actually it's a Gantt. It's basically it's a type of sorry, if it's not mistaken, it's a type of fly larvae that eats on other flies in some way. You can almost see it over here where my cursor is.
Yes, right.
So they built these basically lines that drop down, and these lines are made out of, I guess the best way to put it is mucus, silk in some kind of way, and it's sticky. And the objective is to basically catch flies that come in. And these guys are very small. I mean, if you ever feed your fishes before, those bloodworms, they're smaller than that. They're almost like jentik, but a little bit more slim and longer. And these guys have a relative in New Zealand, which is very, very popular, which you find in Waitomo caves, where they actually have a luminescent butt, like a firefly.
Yeah.
So there are thousands of them on the cave ceiling with all their strands coming down, and they actually have this glow. So insects that fly in see the glow, they get attracted to it, and they get stuck in it. But this one does not glow in particular, but nonetheless it's related, and it's very interesting to see how actually some of them can evolve these certain traits over here. And you find them normally in areas where there's a little bit of breeze, it's a little bit of a hangout. That's where they'll be perfect, because when there's a little bit of turbulence, like when you're flying, you get offline a little bit. So same for insects, it's a great place for them to, they'll be flying, they get pushed a little bit by the wind, and they get stuck. I think for fauna, I think this is what I have so far.
Yeah. Okay. Could you show us some vegetation in the cave?
Yeah, sure. Maybe in the cave, not too much, but I can show you what's above and around it. I'll show you over here.
Right.
So limestone being very dry, you basically do not get a lot of very deep soil cover. So the trees are not very tall, as you can see over here. And most of the plants are taking advantage of any soil they can get, even on the rock itself, like these ferns. You also have some ginger over here, for example, some wild gingers. But here you have this plant, which is pandan. This is a pandanus, and they're very large. I think in Malay, I think mengkuang, isn't it? If I'm mistaken. If I'm not mistaken, but I could be wrong on this one. But basically, it's like our pandan. I wouldn't say it's fragrant, but it's very large, and it has a lot of thorns. Actually, a lot of plants on limestone have various defenses. Either they being very hairy and irritative, being very woody, or they also have a lot of thorns, because growing or living there is very hard, or they have sap. And of course, because of that, they wouldn't want to get destroyed or eaten too easily by herbivores. And so they have these features. Even on the cliffs itself, this is the group that I was with going up with the earlier photo of the Maxparetta rupicola over here. And again, you can see that a lot of trees here are basically just taking advantage of every bit of soil they can get.